Hi, good morning, good evening, namaste. Welcome back to the Jyotish Light YouTube channel. First of all, thank you so much for coming back to this channel, providing your feedback, your encouragement. It only helps us to do more and work towards creating a better understanding and awareness of this ancient science of India called Jyotish or Vedic Astrology. Welcome to this week's edition of Answer Your Queries, where we take some of the most commonly occurring queries that students, fellow practitioners, uh, people generally have with regards to the subject, and we try to at least present our limited point of view on it. And so, for this week's edition, we thought we'll cover a topic which keeps occurring quite frequently, especially with people who are new to Jyotish or students who are just wanting to learn the subject for the first time. And so I'm going to spend the next 5 to 10 minutes just sharing a broad, high level overview of what we feel are the major differences between Jyotish and Western astrology system. And as always, please do provide your feedback and kindly subscribe to our channel. So let me move on. You know, the first point in terms of the difference between the two systems is, of course, the way they originated and the history and tradition behind it. Jyotish actually traces back its roots back to the ancient scriptures of Vedic India called the Vedas. The Vedas really are the soul of the philosophy of the Vedic tradition, and Jyotish is one of the six Vedangas or auxiliary studies that were compiled to study the Vedas more effectively. And each of the Vedangas focused on different aspects of studying the Vedas, and the focus for Jyotish in those days was obviously to study the sky from the vantage point of the earth, and then observe the sky from an astronomical standpoint, but also more importantly, take it one step ahead and see how the movements in the sky or the energy in the sky affects us at an individual level. And in those days, there was not too much of difference between astronomy and astrology. Both were focused on, as I said, studying the sky from the vantage point of the earth, and that was the origination from as far as the Jyotish or the Vedic astrology system went. The Western astrology system, or I would say the Hellenic astrology system, because it sort of traces its roots back to the Greek civilization, also started on the same lines when there was a more pagan culture, if I can put it like that. Um, However, the major difference being that the tradition in Jyotish or Vedic astrology has actually been kept intact because the underlying philosophy or tradition of ancient India and the Vedas has more or less continued generation to generation. It was passed on down from one generation to another generation orally, and certain Sanskrit texts were compiled, like the Brihadarashtra or Shastra. Most of them have been lost. Some are still in existence, but by and large, the tradition has continued to operate uninterrupted. The Western astrology system, on the other hand, got its tradition broken, especially uh, you know post the pagan culture took over. And obviously, this was all seen as something which was unscientific and, so on and so forth. I don't want to sort of pass any value judgments. This is just the history the way it is. And it's only quite recently that a lot of serious practitioners, maybe in the last 100, 150 years, have again started trying to trace back their roots in the Western astrology system. So that is one major difference between the two systems. The other is in the underlying philosophy itself, and I'll touch upon it in the subsequent slides too. But the Vedic astrology or the Jyotish system believes in the cycle of life over many lifetimes and in reincarnation. Basically, that each soul is on a journey of multiple lifetimes in different physical bodies, and based on the overall accumulated karma that the soul has accumulated, um, it takes birth in a physical body to experience a part of the karma in this present lifetime. And the study of Jyotish is to basically understand what will be some of the life patterns, some of the life themes that a soul in this physical body will experience, with the ultimate aim that at some point of time the soul will evolve and achieve moksha or enlightenment, and then break the cycle of rebirth. The Western astrology is obviously more self centered in the sense there's only one life, and really there's not too much of emphasis on destiny as such. A lot of emphasis is placed on free will, whereas the Jyotish system takes into account both free will and predetermined karmic patterns, and both manifest at the same time. So that is another difference just in terms of the philosophy. Let me quickly move on. Um, the second major difference is, of course, just the calculation of the zodiac. Now, the Vedic astrology system uses a sidereal zodiac, whereas the Western astrology system uses a tropical zodiac. Now, all this might sound very technical. It is somewhat technical, but just in terms of simple layman's language, there are 12 zodiac constellations in both the systems, starting from Aries to Pisces. The difference comes in terms of where their exact location in the sky is calculated. And so, quite often, you'll find that a planet which is, say, in the sign of Aries in the Western system, in the Jyotish system, might be in the sign of Pisces, because generally the difference is of 23 to 24 degrees. Um, and that difference is basically due to the sidereal versus tropical system. And so let me just broadly give you a view of why that difference occurs. So this in the sidereal system, the constellations or the zodiac constellations are seen in the backdrop of fixed stars in the background. And these fixed stars, from the vantage point of Earth, do not change their position, and hence they are fixed. So the coordinates of each of the zodiac sign are fixed in the sky. They don't change year on year. What was Aries 2000 years ago continues to be Aries now. Whereas in the tropical system, uh, the zodiac sign positions are calculated based on the relative motion of the Earth around the Sun and the Earth tilting on its axis. That is what we call as the precession of equinoxes. And there are 2 points in any given year where the daytime is equal to the night time, and those are what we call as equinoxes. There is a spring equinox and there is an autumn equinox. The spring equinox is typically when the Aries zodiac sign starts, and the autumn equinox is when the Libra zodiac sign starts. Now, the interesting piece is that this relative position of the zodiac signs keeps changing gradually year on year. And so, over the last 2000, 2500 years, when both the systems would have started at the same starting point, the difference has now come to around 23, 24 degrees. And another interesting fact is that if you download one of these astronomical apps on your phone, say Sky Map or Sky View, and if you track the positions of the planets in the sky right now and which zodiac sign they fall into, they all point towards the sidereal system. But this is a tradition which has stayed. So I'm not going to spend time on sort of trying to justify one over the other, but needless to say, both follow different ways to measure the coordinates of the zodiac. The next difference is sort of tying back to the philosophy of the system itself. Jyotish or Vedic astrology, because it is a study of karma in an individual's life, is predictive. And what it can do is based on once you study the chart of a person, you can actually predict future life events to a fair degree of accuracy. I would say any good Jyotish astrologer can get events right maybe 60 to 70% of the time. It's not easy, but it's definitely doable, and many people are doing it. Whereas the Western system obviously hasn't focused so much on the predictive part of astrology, and it focuses more on the behavioral part of astrology. And again, I don't want to go into the reasons why that is the case, but I'm guessing one of the main reasons is the difference in philosophy, wherein in the sense that the Western system focuses on more on the uh, willpower and ability of the individual to determine everything in his or her life, whereas the Jyotish system says, there is certain amount of free will that is available to all of us, but at the same time, based on the evolution of the soul in many lifetimes, there is a accumulated body of samskaras or karmas, and some of it mature in this physical lifetime in the form of events, the kind of people that we interact with, and the kind of situations we get into, and that is something that can be studied and predicted. And so, just as an example, you can predict timing for marriage, you can predict timing for childbirth, for professional success, and even on the flip side, challenging phases that a person might go through. So that is another one more major difference. The next difference is, of course, a system in Jyotish called the Nakshatra. Now, just like how there are 12 zodiac signs, and typically the movement of the sun in each zodiac sign takes around 29 days, and that's why it's one solar month, if I can put it that way. Jyotish places a lot of emphasis on the moon as well. And the moon typically, there are 27 nakshatras or lunar mansions or segments in the sky where the moon spends time. Typically, in each nakshatra, the moon spends around 2 to 2.5 days. Now, why are nakshatras important? Some people say that nakshatras actually predate even the zodiac segmentation of the sky, at least in the Vedic system. And more importantly, the moon is seen as very important in the Jyotish system to determine the overall conditioning of the person in terms of his mental state of being, his or her mental state of being. The other important reason why moon is so significant in the Jyotish system is because in Jyotish, to predict, you know, life themes and time events in a person's life, we use something called planetary periods or dashas. And the star, each person, the moment he or she is born on this physical body, starts undergoing planetary periods. The sequencing of the planetary periods is determined by the position of the moon in the sky at the time of birth and what nakshatra it was in. And that's why it becomes really important. Next, as I was alluding to, is the major difference, and that is the dashas or planetary or sign-based periods. Now, these are the tools that Jyotish has to actually predict future events. And this is something which doesn't exist in the Western astrology system because the focus hasn't been on predictive tools. But of late, obviously, the Western system uses a lot of transits to predict life themes, but they are not as I would say mature or accurate as compared to the dasha system in Jyotish. And like I said, dashas are planetary or sign-based time periods that each of us go through, and then depending on what those periods indicate in a person's life, it is very unique and specific to a person's birth chart. It is not generic. It is not the same for everyone. It is very unique to each soul because each soul is unique. You can actually predict what that person might experience in terms of probabilities in the future course of date. Um, the next difference, of course, is just in terms of the divisional charts. Jyotish obviously both use the natal chart or the position of the sky when the person was took his first breath as the main birth chart, but then Jyotish takes it to one step ahead, and it mathematically derives a lot of divisional charts from the main birth chart, and each divisional chart pertains to one specific area of life. So you have a divisional chart for marriage, you have a divisional chart for career, you have a divisional chart for property, for wealth, for parents, for religion, for spirituality, and you name it, education. And so in Jyotish, when we study the static potential that resides in an individual's life, we not only refer to the main birth chart but also look at the divisional charts, especially for timing future events. This is something that traditionally hasn't existed in the Western astrology system and again sort of makes the Jyotish system more accurate and precise. Uh, the next difference is, of course, in terms of yogas and special aspects. Now, yoga, everybody has heard of the word yoga in more physical forms. There are many forms of yoga. The physical yoga is, of course, the most popular one, but yoga is essentially the meaning of the word yogas is union, right? And so in Jyotish, yogas, what they mean is combinations of planets in a birth chart, which either indicate, uh, you know, uh, positive themes or challenging situations in a person's life. And so there are planetary yogas for wealth, for success, societal success, for achieving spiritual enlightenment, for you name it, rise to fame. And similarly, there are planetary yogas for health challenges, difficulties, and so on and so forth. And yoga has become really critical when we're studying the charts of people because, you know, they are like the static equation in a person's life. And the yogas get activated when the dashas get activated or the planetary periods get activated. And so, to understand what might unfurl in a person's life, we look at yogas and then their activation in certain periods that the person might be running. And of course, this doesn't exist in the Western system as well. Then, finally, the use of transits. Now, Western astrology relies a lot heavily on transits, and transits are basically the current position of the planets in the sky. They're the same for everyone. However, how they impact the static native birth chart varies because the Western system doesn't have a concept of dashas and yogas as a part of their tradition. For them to be predictive about any potential life theme, the only tool that they have is transits. They also make use of the outer planets as a part of the transit system heavily, which basically means Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. In the Jyotish system, transits are operate secondary to the Dasha period system. So, for a person to be, say, getting married in a certain period of time, or having children, or getting promotion, he or she should be running the appropriate Dasha system or time periods. And the final check is to check on transits. And obviously, the Jyotish system doesn't rely on sorry about that, doesn't rely on outer planets. So it's really up to Saturn that what we are considering. And finally, the last difference is in terms of remedies or bias. Um, um, there's a prescriptive side to Jyotish, and which is basically that a person has a static potential, but then the person also has tools available to him or her to modify some of the static potential, and that is essentially through more religious practices, more philanthropic practices, and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, this practice has been commercially abused and exploited by a lot of practitioners because they instill a fear in the person's mind. But this definitely is an aspect that exists in the Vedic astrology system. And finally, we come down to the interpretation of the chart itself. Now, like I said, in Jyotish, there are three broad things that one can study. One is, of course, the static potential of the what the soul is likely to experience in this life, the psychological makeup of the person, just in terms of likes, dislikes, and then the third thing is, of course, the kind of events, people, situations that a person may experience in his or her life. In the Western astrology system, the focus is predominantly on the psychological aspect of the or the mental makeup of the person, you know, and to a lesser extent, how the current positions of the transits influence a person at any given point of time. So this was just a brief on the broad differences between the Vedic and the Jyotish astrology and Western astrology system. If you like this video, please do subscribe to our channel, and thank you for your continued support. Have a great day.